Welcome to Drama Free Healthy Living with Jess Cording. I'm your host, Jess Cording. I'm a registered dietitian, health coach, and author, and I'm here to help you streamline your wellness routine and establish a sane, more balanced relationship with food and fitness so you can reach your goals without losing your mind. On this podcast, we'll talk about nutrition, exercise, self-care, mindset, and more. I'll be bringing you interviews and expert insight on the topics that matter to your health and wellness. Hi, and welcome back to the Drama Free Healthy Living podcast. I'm your host, Jess Cording. I'm so excited you're joining me today. I have been looking forward to recording this episode for a while now. I did this last year and really found it to be a really fun experience. So I'm doing this again. 12 lessons learned in the past 12 months. And every year I do some kind of birthday reflection. And last year I was inspired by Jay Shetty's 12 lessons learned in 12 months. And I just love that the exercise of doing that reflection so much, I decided to do it again. So I'm just sharing a list today of some lessons and just key takeaways that have been on my mind in the past year. And they're vaguely chronologically ordered, not so much. I'm probably not going to really explain all of that. But I wanted to share a few of the big highlights for me from the past 12 years. And I hope that some of them resonate with you. If you do find some of these, you're like listening, you're nodding, you're like, yeah, that totally checks out. I would love to hear about it. Please send me a DM on Instagram at Jess Cording, or take a screenshot of yourself listening to this episode and post it on your Instagram stories and tag me. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this episode. So, okay, without further ado, let's get into it. So I want to start off with this one that I've thought a lot about over the past year, which is that change can be good. And there's so many ways that this can show up. I think that we can be really, it can be scary, right? Change is a big deal. It forces us to think differently, do things differently, come up with new ideas, new routines. And sometimes it's up to us. Sometimes it's not up to us when we change. But at one example of positive change that I experienced in the last 12 months was, and this technically started a little bit earlier, but I was somebody who had food sensitivities for a really long time. We're talking like 13 plus years. It really started in my mid 20s, early 20s, I guess, early to mid 20s. And then, so I could not eat tree nuts. After a while, peanuts were causing me some symptoms. I couldn't do, and then when I turned 30, I couldn't tolerate shellfish. I would get like itchy. So I was and a lot of fruits I couldn't eat, a lot of stone fruit, and it was really frustrating. I couldn't go to a restaurant without being like, it was this and this and this, and how's this prepared? And it was really stressful. And I had this weird experience. My husband and I were in Italy, summer of 2023, and he gave me a bite of a sandwich, and there was something crunchy in it. And he didn't tell me at the time, but there were almonds in it. And he was like, "How do you feel?" I was fine. It was so wild. I was shocked. And but I didn't, like eat more of it. I was so, hey, let's just see what happens. I have my EpiPen, I have Benadryl. Like if I need it, it's cool. But when we got back home, I made an appointment with an allergist, and to be honest, I had not been to see an allergist in like, I don't know, like since I was 30. So like probably at that point, like 7 or 8 years. And oh gosh, because the last time I'd seen an allergist was when I was having trouble with peanuts, and he was like, "Well, just don't eat peanuts." Like that was sort of the big takeaway. So I saw a new allergist in a town near where I live now, and I did all this blood work. I did oral allergy tests in the office. I did everything you're supposed to do because all my blood work came back clean, which was a miracle. And then I showed up and I was eating some foods in the office to make sure I was like, okay. It was so cool. So I haven't shared about this much on social media or really anywhere because I haven't wanted to come across as someone who's like, I cured my allergies and, pay me money and you can too. because I still don't really fully understand it. I don't know if it has to do with the fact that I now have two cats that I was allergic to before, and maybe that changed something, or maybe it was my experience of getting off hormonal birth control and focusing on my health in a new way. Who the hell knows? It could just be time, right? As my allergist said to me, he's like, maybe I think you're just one of the lucky ones. Like sometimes this just happens. And that's not to say that, this is going to be my situation forever. Like, it would be wonderful if the rest of my life I could eat whatever I want and not have to worry about it. I'm just grateful for that right now. But, our bodies change and things happen. So I just wanted to share that example. Like, that was a change I never would have anticipated, but it was just a surprise. And, it took a little of like medical, checking things out to make sure. But that was just a nice reinforcing event for me to be like, okay, sometimes change is a positive thing. It's not all bad. And that's just one example that I wanted to share with you. I've had other things over the course of this year that have also reminded me this. But yes, change can be good. So number two, simplify what you can. I have gone through uh, in the last few years a lot of very overwhelming experiences. And I think that, and a lot of it comes from having too many things going on at once, or there are complex things or multiple complex things going on at once. And something that I have found very useful is like, and what I would share with anyone else, when you feel overwhelmed, clear whatever you can off your plate, off your schedule, um, and then ask yourself what's actually essential to focus on. Some of the most powerful questions you can ask yourself are, what really matters right now? What do I actually need right now? What do I actually need to do in this moment? So when you're feeling overwhelmed, simplify what you can. And sure, there may be times that there are things you can't simplify, but do what you can. That can be really powerful, just to focusing on what you are able to do. Something else that came up for me this year was making peace with the idea that you can be angry at someone, but also love them at the same time. And I won't share too much about that, but there was something with a family member this year that really rocked me, just really upset me. And I have a very hard time sitting with anger. I don't fully understand where that comes from. It's a thing I've talked about with my therapist. And I think some of it is just conditioning as a child, that there were some emotions that were allowed and some that were, I don't want to say not allowed, but strongly discouraged. And anger was one of those on the list that was like, if you feel angry, you should just let it go. Don't feel angry. Like, or, find something to feel guilty about. That it's your fault. It's like it was a really different, I have a very hard time with anger, and I've had to really work hard to let myself feel angry. But something that, I had even less experience with was just knowing that you can love someone, but also be so mad at them, like so mad. And finding a way within yourself to let those things coexist and still feel that love and still share that love and express that love, but also giving yourself permission to process your anger in healthy ways and to express it when you needed to. So that was something that it would have been great to not have to learn that this year, but I did find it really illuminating and helpful to acknowledge that, yes, you can love someone so deeply, but also be angry at them, and that it's okay to process that anger as well. Because when we don't process our anger and we direct it at ourselves, that's when we run into some unhealthy behaviors that really only end up hurting us. So, that just comes back to let yourself feel your feelings. This is just an example of two feelings that, we don't always think of as being able to coexist, but in a lot of ways, they're two sides of the same coin. Those are very intense emotions. There's so much wrapped up in each of them. And it's important to give yourself the space to work on those and work through them, I should say. Another big one is you are the one who has to change your life. Now, the way that I experienced this is I don't know if any of you out there can relate. I have a feeling it's very possible, just from my conversations with clients and audience members. But so many of us wait for permission. And that can look like permission from someone saying, like, you're allowed to do this thing. That's one way of permission, or someone like intuiting, like, oh, you need to be doing this other thing, or, why don't you do this instead of this, or like giving us permission to do something that we want to do. Or on the flip side, waiting for someone to recognize that we are so miserable in something and to say, I don't think you're very happy. Like, can we make a change? Or like, do you need to change? Do you need something different? I think sometimes we're waiting for other people to notice what we're going through and to give us permission to change. And for me, this shows up a lot in my professional life. When I was younger, it totally would show up in my personal life. Like, I always had a really hard time. That's not true. I was that person when I was dating. If I was not into a relationship anymore, I had no problem just saying, like, listen, this isn't working out. I think we should just, move on, not waste each other's time. Like that as I got older was not so hard. But I do remember like that was really difficult, like to, to navigate that. So where it's shown up for me as an adult is in my professional life, where sometimes, I have gone through phases where I've thought that I needed to like wait for someone to tell me it was okay to do something. And sometimes the kindest thing we can do for ourselves and for others is to be really clear about what we need, what we want, what needs to happen for us to, be our best selves, do our best work, show up as the person we want to be. So, this can be your professional life, this can be your personal life, but don't wait for permission, because that often it's never going to come. Um, my mom would always tell me, that everyone's got their head up their own ass. Like no one notices like most of the time, like what you're going through, especially if you are someone who is a people pleaser or who is in the habit of making things look easy. Others might not pick up on struggles that you're having. So it's you are the one with the power to make those positive changes and to adjust what you need to adjust. And sometimes that's going to be scary because we'll have to share things with people that it's awkward to share it or we're scared of what they might say or think. But at the end of the day, you have to take care of you. And, when you take care of you, you can better take care of others. So you are the one with the power to change your life. Don't forget that. Don't give other people that power. And so I guess sort of related to that, or related to a lot of things for me in the last few years, just remember how strong you are. Oh my gosh. I sometimes, and I'm sure you've had this experience too, but if you were to, like, I had to fill out a form recently. I was seeing a new healthcare provider and I had to list like medical and like mental health history and all this stuff. And I'm like going down the list of all these things of like, even just the past 4 years, I was like, whoa, that's a lot of stuff. It's a lot of shit. But I'm still here. I'm okay. Like I survived all that, right? I saw this meme recently. I've seen versions of it floating around, but I love it so much. It's like, remember, you have survived 100% of your hardest days. That is so true and it's so powerful. But sometimes we get so wrapped up in worrying about who we're going to let down or all the ways in which we might be failing or not being good enough, whatever it might be, right? But just to remember that you are really strong and you've already survived so much and you can survive whatever it is that you're dealing with right now. So don't forget how strong you are. I also, and some of you have heard me talk about this before, but the next one is trust the signs. Oh boy, we could do a whole episode on this. And there's a lot that I'm not going to share with you today on this because some of it is um, very private, and it's something that I want to really wait till I have more perspective to share about this. But oh man, I've always believed in signs. And it's just so cool when they show up. It's amazing. And for me, it's always like I will ask for the sign. If we're talking about signs from the universe, signs from our loved ones or people, spirits, entities, whatever you want to call it, that we are connected to, Like, when I'm asking for a sign, quotes around sign, um, I like to ask for the sign and then just kind of let it go. Um, because, sometimes you get the sign and that's the sign. Sometimes you don't get the sign and that's also a sign. And I know I'm not the first person to share that. That's something, I grew up hearing about that. But I have believed in this stuff. Since I can remember, like I totally got made fun of in school because I made the mistake of talking about it as a child. I thought everybody had this connection to, if you want to call it the other side or powers that be, the universe, spirits. I don't know. I have the words I use to talk about those things in my life. I know that they're, different for each person, but it's always come very naturally to me. It's not something I've ever thought of as being weird or scary. It just is, and it's really beautiful. But I've just been amazed this year. And I really can't wait till I can share more of these stories with you because some of them are really wild. But just like, where I would ask for the sign and then it would come like in really beautiful, strange, but unmistakable ways. But one of my favorites that I will share is, my dad, when he passed, like our thing is feathers. That's sort of like how he shows up for me. And I was going through a lot of just stressful stuff right around the anniversary of his passing. And I remember saying, like, hey dad, like I know I don't ask for you to send me signs a lot, but like I really, I just could really use like just a little sign from you just to know that you're around. And I was like, I know we usually do feathers, but if there's something else that, it's gonna be hard for me to like, I trust you, but I know feathers is usually our thing, but I just would really it would be really nice to see a sign from you. So, and I kind of just like forgot about that. I just kind of went about my day. But then the next morning, I went out to my car and there was a little white feather stuck on the driver's side window on the outside. I don't even know how it would get there. It was so bizarre, but it was right there. It was like stuck on my window, and it just made me feel so good. It was just a lovely little reminder. Um, Now, if that's a little all too woo-woo for you, I think another way of looking at trusting signs is because again, I'm not going to go too deep into the stories of like trusting signs this year and sort of some of the specific signs and things and how that showed up later, but um our body sends us signs, right? Like if you are really tired and you don't know why, that's a sign that something is off and needs to be addressed. So that's where, you're looking at, your sleep patterns. What are you eating? Are there allergens happening? Is there stress? Is there some kind of physical condition? Like, that's our body is sending you a sign that something needs attention. And then we need to be detectives and look at what's going on and sometimes often with the help of a provider, like get to the bottom of what that sign is. Or even like on a lighter note, if you are someone who finds you always crave steak around your period, like that's your body sending you a sign that you need iron because you're losing it in your blood. Like, so listen to the signs and trust them. So whether that is signs from the universe or spirit, or just signs your body is sending you, or a gut feeling about something. I had an experience recently where I just had this gut feeling after a meeting with a person. I was like, I don't know what this is, but just something doesn't feel right. Like what is this? And I asked someone about it. They're like, oh my gosh, yes, I know that person. They are not trustworthy. Like, don't. That was your gut telling you. So stuff like that, I think is really important to pay attention to. So trust the signs. Another big one. Oof, man, this was so get out of the way. Oh boy. Now this is something that I grew up hearing about, and at different times it's been harder to, put it into practice than others, but sometimes we're the bottleneck or we're what holds us back. Um, and it's important to recognize when that's happening and to be really compassionate with ourselves when we do recognize it, but then to take that information and take action. And I definitely had a situation in my professional life like that this year where it was just I needed to acknowledge, how that was playing out for me and to do something about it. But whew, talk about trusting science. I I was in a very strange accident this year, and I'm not going to get into too many of the specifics, but I was you know, I was in this weird accident where a door fell on me, a very heavy door in a bathroom, and I remember I was washing my hands. I turn around, I look at the door, and I'm like, oh, that just doesn't look right. And I didn't think anything really major would happen. But what happened was the door had come off its hinges. And this was a building with like, this was like new construction. It was like supposed to be like state of the art, everything. And this door fell in on me. And in the moment, I was trying to hold it up. Because at first I thought it was, I wasn't thinking. I thought, oh, I can push this off of me. It'll be fine. I'll put it back in the lamp. No. But I was thinking, oh my God, my will's not done. Is my husband going to be okay? Like all that was like going through my head. And then it just something, I heard a voice that was like, get out of the way. So I slid to the side. God, I did end up a little banged up, but that freaking door, it took out a sink. It crashed so hard. If I hadn't gotten out of the way, it could have killed me. And at very least, it could have caused serious head damage. I got so lucky, but also I knew to move to the side, get the hell out of the way. And once I knew that I was okay, and like I had some bruises, I was kind of banged up. I had to go fill out a ton of paperwork and get an exam. Um, and I just, but once I knew I was okay, in that moment, I had just seen some things about myself and my future and what I really wanted that I couldn't unsee. And I promised myself that I would do whatever it took to bring my life into alignment to make that happen. And it's really, it's not cool that it took something so extreme to get my attention. I think this is something that happens to some of us where we're just so caught up in like people pleasing mode, focusing on doing just the thing in front of us, like our, being dutiful, following our responsibilities, that we don't always check in with what we really need or want. And sometimes, our attention is grabbed by these really intense experiences. So my big takeaway from that one was to get out of the way and get on track with what I actually really need and want and what feels right. Um, that was really scary, and I did not feel myself. If I'm being honest, I still have a little bit of lingering flickers. It doesn't feel like full on PTSD, but I do notice that I have to be a little more intentional sometimes. Like I'll have um those thoughts of like that moment when it was falling on me and like having to kind of be like, okay, we're okay now. Like we survived that. We're fine. Like, but just it was a really close call and I got really, really lucky and I'm so grateful for that. And it just was sort of a reminder of like, we never know what might be, around the corner, what could happen. And, we really need to check in with ourselves and make sure that we're honoring, I don't want to sound like hokey, but honoring our truth, honoring what feels right, taking care of ourselves. And kind of building on that, next one is ask yourself how you'll feel later. When making decisions, this is so helpful, especially if you're prone to overthinking or you get really caught up on in and around like what everyone else wants or what you're expected to do or what you're supposed to do, right? I think it's so important to get clear on what's really important to you or really aligned with your values and let that be your guide when making decisions. Check in with yourself. How will you feel in 20 minutes? 20 days, 20 weeks, 20 years. Like, oh man, I still can't believe I did this. I went to my 20-year high school reunion this year. And I'm kind of like, part of me is like, why did I waste the money? Like, I'm sorry. It was so boring. I there I like I also I didn't check my yearbook before I went. I didn't like I don't know. I was like, well, it was so close by where they were holding it. I was like, future me, this was how I made the decision. Future me will be really annoyed if I don't go. Like the curiosity of like wondering what I might have like who I might have had conversations with or what it might have felt like to go to that reunion. So I made that decision to go, thinking that me in the future would be annoyed with current me for not going. Cool. But then I got there and it was so boring. And I had this experience of looking around and being like, oh my God, I don't know who any of these people are. Like some of their faces look vaguely familiar, but I couldn't put names to them. Like, and it really there none of the people that I really had relationships with in high school were there. There was one person there, or a couple people there that I kind of remember like, oh yeah, I think we talked in class sometimes, or went on a couple dates with that person here and like, stuff like that. But like I just didn't recognize anyone. I had a few conversations, but it was like I had this moment, I was like, I don't know what I'm doing here. It reminded me that there's so many things that seem to matter now. And that's why I think it's so important to get really clear on our emotional truths or to be really specific about what is important to us. Um, and to take that long view because there's so many things in 20 years that we won't remember, things that won't matter. And I found myself thinking too, if I don't know who these people are, they probably don't know who I am, like, so it was an interesting experience. And I'm glad that I went. Like, I'm kind of like, ugh, like, I've spent that money, the why? But then I know that if I hadn't gone, my future self would have been kind of annoyed at me. So I'm glad I went to see what that was all about. I do not plan on going to any future reunions because, like, I can't even imagine. But it was interesting because I was like, wow, I don't know who these people are. And they all seem so old. Like so, or at least most of them. I was like, oh my gosh, did I just get really old and boring and nobody told me? Oh boy. I mean, I think that that's all. Age is a number, all that. But it was an interesting experience and I'm glad I did it. But I think I'm done with high school reunions. So, okay, there's that. Um, all right. So next up, ask for what you need. And this kind of goes back to getting out of the way, also simplifying what you can, knowing that you're the one who can change your life. But just to get a little more specific, is that we really need to ask for what we need. Knowing it is one thing, but then being assertive and asking for it is another. And on the other side of that, because we can't do everything ourselves, right? It's important to ask for help, accept help. That is also a different thing, right? I have definitely struggled with accepting help, but um, it's we all have different strengths and we can't all do everything. And so there might be something that you're struggling with, but someone else is an expert in and they can't wait to help you. And they will do such a great job and make such a difference. And don't be afraid of that. Asking for help and accepting help is not a weakness, it is a strength. So definitely this year, I have focused a lot on asking for what I need, whether that be related to like personal life and health, like advocating for yourself, and or whether it's more professional, asking for what I need. Or for me, this was a year where I definitely hired more help, which I wish I had done that sooner. But definitely ask and accept. And when you need to, hire. Um, and I also want to say, trust the process. That's something that can be really scary, um, especially if we're going through territory that's a little bit unknown, whether that's in our professional life, where we're learning a new skill or we're in a new endeavor, and maybe we don't have all the information about how things are going to work out at one point. But when you can trust the process and be more present, that can be so helpful. Sometimes when we get really overly when we become overcome by anxiety and wondering and what if this doesn't happen and what if that does happen and what if things go this way, it really blocks us from being present in the moment and learning and growing and having a full experience. So trust the process. I had a lot of moments this year where that was front and center, and I'm sure that will continue to be a theme because, being a human on this planet in this time, involves a lot of that. And then let go of the timeline. This is something I've been working on for years now, for a number of reasons. But sometimes it's very easy to compare ourselves to others and where we think we should be compared to where they are. There's so much we don't know about other people, things they don't know about us. And there's no perfect timeline. And I really am of the mind that things happen when they're meant to, as they are meant to. And you know, it- I have my entire life, I have operated often out of feeling like I was running out of time. I remember being like 10 years old and feeling that way, and like I had to accomplish XYZ by the age of 14 or 18 or 22. Like I often put weirdly insane amounts of pressure on myself for various things. And then when my husband and I were trying to conceive and going through that whole experience, um like that was really hard, like just doing math in my head of like the age I would be at which I might have a child, and like how old would I be, like when they were this age, and that really threw me for a loop. Or in my professional life now, it's so like I hate that experience where I will see someone who like has come out with like some new book or resource, or they're this really successful or person I perceive as being really successful, and I'm like, oh, but they're younger than me. Oh, like but I forget sometimes, even I forget, because I'm a healthcare provider who is always trying to like build people up and help them feel more confident. I still have to do a lot of stuff for myself too, just to remind myself that there's no magic timeline that we are all on. Everybody is on their own. In many ways, we are on our own timeline. There's all these different timelines coexisting. And sometimes I like to remind myself that, like, maybe sometimes if there's something that you thought you wanted to work out at this time, if that had happened, maybe that could have been a cool experience, but then you might not have experienced this other really amazing thing that wasn't even on your radar. So I do a lot of thinking about timelines, and just I've done a lot of work on just letting go of the timeline, and just it's been really helpful, really incredible to shift perspective that way. And I think that's something I'm maybe this is my whole life. I'll maybe working on this one, but it has been a really big focus for me in the past 12 months. And then the last one that I wanted to share, I think this was a year where I have examined how I experience different emotions a lot. And something that came up for me a bit later in the year, but that I found very interesting to reflect on is that because sometimes we label certain emotions as good, bad, right? And we kind of are like, all right, so we should just, all the good ones are easy and all the bad ones are hard. But I find that that's not always the case. So one example I have found myself reflecting on is that hope can be a really hard emotion for me to sit with. I don't know if you can relate to this at all. Because often we label hope as a positive emotion, something that's like, oh, we should be attempting or striving to feel hopeful, and it's all good when we feel hopeful, and that's such a, you know, great place to be. But in my experience, hope is it feels so vulnerable and scary. And and this comes up in my personal life, my professional life. I have this feeling sometimes that like if I am caught feeling hopeful and then something doesn't work out, that I will be like laughed at or ridiculed for letting myself be like naive enough to have hope. Like I don't know where this comes from. I think there's more more to explore there. But hope, and the more I talk to other people about this, like friends about this, for example, the more I realize I'm not alone in feeling this way. Um, like hope is really scary, and it does involve some letting go and letting yourself daydream and letting yourself tap into a side of you that some of us have been conditioned to shut down because we were trying to be responsible or prepare for the worst or things like that. And it's a vulnerable, scary place, and that's okay. So if you find hope to be a difficult emotion to sit with, accept that. Not saying like you should accept being uncomfortable, but that there's nothing wrong with you. Okay. There is nothing wrong with you if you sometimes experience certain positive emotions as being a little more complicated than that. So, what I would say is that give yourself some grace and some space. Take the time to meditate on it, explore where those feelings come from. Let yourself feel the good stuff, let yourself process the tricky stuff. If you need professional assistance, that's what professionals are there for. but don't feel like there is something wrong with you because you're not experiencing emotions in like the correct way. I think that when you do experience an emotion that feels tricky or you experience it differently than you think you quote unquote should, that's something to explore and be compassionate with yourself without. So, all right, that is my 12 lessons from the past 12 months. I really appreciate you being here with me today, taking the time. As always, I appreciate you so much. Um, I would love to hear what you thought of this episode, if any of these resonated with you. So, you can post yourself listening on Instagram and, tag me. I'd love to hear what you think or send me a DM. I'm at Jess Cording on Instagram. And as always, guys, I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. And we'll talk soon. Thank you for listening to Drama Free Healthy Living with Jess Cording. We'll see you next time.